Okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about rape. Unfortunately, we're talking about rape, and not the most pleasant subject in the world. Ellis in 1989 identified 3 theories of rape. This is really important because they were trying to answer the question, why? And nobody has an answer. However, there are 3 different theories as to why people rape. The feminist theory is that emphasizing rape is a pseudo-sexual act of male domination and exploitation of women. So it is an act of male domination and female exploitation. Now, if you look at pornography, if you check out any pornography and there is any violence in there, you will see that this is true. That it has to do with domination and exploitation of women. And it's male domination, of course. So this fits as far as pornography is concerned. There are many rapes in the United States that this will fit. However, it's not the only theory, and those aren't the only rapes that are occurring. The social learning approach suggests that sexual aggression is learned through observation and imitation. Now, this fits with pornography as well. How were they learning? They just had CNN just did an expose on pornography. Children are, of course, parents are not paying attention to what's going on with their kids. So the children are looking at pornography, and it's not that hard to find pornography on the internet. All you have to do is type in anything, and a picture of naked people will come up. Usually it's a naked woman. So we are learning this behavior somewhere. It comes from somewhere, and of course it comes from television, it comes from videos. The new Joker movie that came out last weekend, evidently people are protesting it because there's so much violence in the movie, and the violence is, it's not just violence, but it shows violence as a good thing. I don't know about the movie. They also say that it has something to do with mental illness. It shows mental illness as a violent situation. So the social learning theory says that we learn by observation and we learn by imitation, and of course that's what we're learning. That's where we're getting our sexual aggression. The last one is the evolutionary theory. It kind of is an apology theory for forced sexual intercourse. According to evolutionary theory, if we look at, I was just reading a book about ducks. Evidently ducks, the only way that they reproduce is through rape. The male duck will attack the female duck. He'll pin her down, he pins her down, and then he has intercourse with her, and he forces her to get pregnant. We see this throughout the animal kingdom. The forced rape is how you produce offspring. Well, it's the same way with humans. This is not, this works. This works as far as reproduction is concerned. If you want to reproduce, then rape is one way that you can do it. If we look at the statistics on rape, most of the women that are raped are individuals who are viable. They are ovulating. They are in that ovulatory area. The women between 18 and 24 are the most likely to be raped. Women between 24 and 40 are also it's very common for those individuals to be raped. Women are girls younger than 18 but older than 10 years old are also very likely to be raped. So it has something to do with reproduction. The reproductive aspect is there, unfortunately. And we see that in the statistics. These different approaches illustrate that rape cannot be easily explained by any one theory, obviously. Each of these classification systems fails to capture all the behaviors and motivations that typify rapists. And of course, if we were profiling rapists, if we were profiling a rape, we try to determine what kind of an individual has done this. Is he angry with his mother? And that's why he's being aggressive toward women. Was he violent? Did he complete the intercourse? All of these things are very important. A lot of individuals will be sexually aggressive. There was a individual that is one of the top serial killers in the world, in the history of mankind. We have just identified him as a serial killer, and what we discovered was that he has murdered 93 times. He kills, but he doesn't rape. And of course, they were calling him a serial rapist before, and now they're calling him a killer because he doesn't have sexual intercourse with the individuals. He gets sexual gratification from killing the women, not from having intercourse with them. So he's not really a rapist. He's really a murderer. And he was very upset about the fact that they kept calling him a rapist. So when he went to court, they would call him a serial rapist, and of course he'd go off on him. But as soon as a policeman called him a killer, he started confessing to all of his murders, because he's not a rapist. He wanted that to be known, and he was insulted by the fact that they called him a rapist, because he wasn't. He loved women. Okay. I know, none of that makes any sense. Sure it does. Sure it does. Just
so
ask.
What makes a person do that?
What do you mean, be a murderer?
Yeah.
He got sexual gratification from killing people. Only women. And since he needed sexual gratification, what he was seeking was that gratification. That's the only way he could get any gratification. It's not like he was ejaculating when he murdered the women, but it made him feel powerful. And now he's in his 70s, and he's crippled, and now we're charging him with all these murders. But he remembers all these women. He has a photographic memory. So he remembers the faces, and now he's drawing pictures of all these women that he's murdered all throughout the United States. They were women on the margins of society. They were prostitutes, they were homeless, they were just women he would pick up that nobody cared about. So he was able to murder them. They found the bodies, but of course the police didn't put a lot of effort into figuring out who was the murderer, since the women weren't that important as far as society was concerned. If it had been a wealthy woman, if it had been the mayor of a town, I'm sure that they would have put a little bit more effort into it. But a prostitute, nobody cares. Well, the family cares, but they're the only ones that care.
We don't put value on life anymore, do we?
We never have. Have we?
I don't know. Hadn't really thought about it until now.
Well, I mean, we send soldiers out en masse, and some of them don't come back.
And they're the defenders, and they're usually the ones who are, I would hope, who join the services in order to protect their country.
Oh, no, let's not.
But there's still,
Let's not be that idealistic. A lot of these guys were drafted. A lot of these guys joined the military because they didn't have
All the
anything else
Thompsons,
to
like
do.
my grandparents.
I still got quite a ways.
Yeah,
Vietnam was a mess.
but their lives still have value.
Evidently not.
Their society is sick.
Evidently not. A good example is what's going on right now. Donald Trump yesterday said that he's pulling the troops out of Syria. We've got, 3,000-4,000 troops there. They are serving as a buffer between, everybody hates the Kurds, okay? Everybody hates them. Iranians hate them, the Iraqis hate them, the Syrians hate them, the Turks hate them. Everybody hates them. They don't like these people. But they're alive, of course, and they're right there. And they have been serving as the military arm. They're the ones that have been doing the fighting for the United States in Syria. Now the Turks consider the Kurds a terrorist group, and there is a terrorist group in Turkey. So if we pull out, what's going to happen to the Kurds? Well, the Turks are going to come in and try to wipe them out, try to get rid of them. That's what's going to happen. And yesterday, Donald Trump said he's going to pull his troops, and they are the only buffer between the Turkish army and the Kurds who have been have been the individuals that have been fighting for us against ISIS in Syria. So the question is, does life have any worth? And the answer is no. If we don't care about the Kurds, and if we let the Turks murder the Kurds, then no, life has no meaning. Maybe my life has a meaning because I'm an American. But Trump doesn't seem to be too concerned about the Kurds.
Another thing.
Is he getting a lot of backlash? Go ahead.
Well, he is. He's getting backlash from the Republicans, from his own party.
Why is he allowing our ally, so to speak, who is helping the states, which is his supposed country, why is he allowing them to be murdered by the Turks, if that were to be?
Well, it hasn't happened yet, of course. I mean, he just said yesterday that he's pulling them out. But he's already pulled some of his troops out. So, are they our allies? Well, the problem is, of course, one of his best buddies is Putin, is a Russian. And of course, I fought in the Cold War. You know, I was in the military for 12 years, facing off the communists, the Russians, the Soviets at the time, of course. And he seems to really like Putin. And of course, Putin is in Syria. He's Assad's buddy. So if he pulls out, then the Russians win, the Syrians, then Assad wins, and the Iranians win, because the Iranians are also part of that coalition. Anyway. I know, it's kind of weird, isn't it?
And they're the ones, the Iranians are the ones that allow men to marry 10-year-old children.
Sure. Well, I mean, most Muslim countries allow that. That's in their law. That's in Sharia law. It's not uncommon in any place that you have a Muslim, a dominant Muslim religion. It's also common in Hindu countries, so it happens in India. We're talking about billions of people, okay? We're talking about a lot of people.
Maybe our values are just different from theirs.
Well, it's a possibility. But that doesn't make them wrong.
Doesn't make it
Just-
right either,
Well, sure it does.
in my book, but, you know.
Well, I mean, if
from
you
the
think your
world.
values make you right, then their values make them right.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, okay, well, let's get back to racism. Which is more fun than talking about Kurds. The Peshmerga, they're the ones that are doing our fighting for us. It's not where, oh, I know why. Okay, that makes sense. That's logical. Peshmerga. Some are limited by the fact that they are based on studies of convicted rapists who have been sentenced to prison. Unfortunately, we only catch about 10%. We only convict about 10% of the rapists. Of the rapists that are sentenced, only about 10% actually go to prison. So we don't really catch that many, and then of the ones that go to court, only about 10% of them actually go to jail. The group that we're talking to are the ones that got caught and the ones that had to go to jail, but that still leaves 90% that we're not even dealing with. Statistics aren't very good. There's a reason why we have such a difficult time convicting rapists. Usually there are no witnesses except the person that was raped and the person that was doing the rape. What the rapist will probably say, I'm sure that the rapist will say, it was consensual. I seduced her, or she seduced me. Probably he'll say, she seduced me. I didn't want to have sex, and she wanted me, or something like that, something that's stupid like that. Only 14.6% of rapes were committed by a stranger to the victim. So the possibility of some strange individual with a hoodie on and sunglasses jumping out of the bushes and grabbing a female and having sex with her isn't very high. It doesn't happen all that often. 16.4% were committed by a non-relative acquaintance. 16.4%. 6.4% were committed by relatives. 64% were committed by intimate partners. Now, why in the world would somebody who is your intimate partner, your husband, your boyfriend, your whatever, why in the world would they sexually assault somebody, their significant other? Why would they do that? What's wrong with these people? Why would they do that?
They need that control.
Possibly.
Or thinking that maybe they won't get reported.
Probably.
Or thinking that they have a right to do that.
Ah, they have a right to do that. I wonder if alcohol's involved.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Once they're probably happened to them before.
Exactly. As of 2008, the estimate for sexual assault committed by a known individual is about 70%. This is according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics in 2011. A little bit dated material, but it still seems to hold true. About 70% of the time, the rape is committed by somebody that the lady knows. The closer the relationship between the female victim and the offender, in general, the greater the likelihood that the police would not be told about the assault. Wives usually don't turn their husbands in. They can if they want to. Most states have laws on the books that say a husband cannot rape his wife. He can't force her to have sex. When the offender was a current or former husband or boyfriend, about 3/4 of all victimizations were not reported to the police. So this gets a little confusing, doesn't it? Date rapes tend to occur on weekends between 10 o'clock p.m. and 1 o'clock in the morning, and they usually take place at the assailant's home. Somebody invites you, well, this is what was going on with Jeffrey Epstein. This is what was going on with Bill Cosby. This is the reason Bill Cosby, despite the fact he's fairly infirm, is in jail right now. He was inviting women to come over to his house. He was drugging them, and then he was sexually assaulting them. And this went on for years, and nobody said anything, as weird as that may seem. And then finally it got out that Bill Cosby was doing this, despite the fact he has 6 children. And a wife that he's been with for over 40 years. Oh, great. I'm talking about rape today.
She's got her headphones on.
Okay, all right. Date rapes tend to involve situations in which both the attacker and the victim have been using alcohol or drugs, but they are less likely to involve the use of weapons. Instead, the date rapists employ verbal threats, physical prowess, or overpowering their victim, as sad as that may potentially be. Rape victims suffer physical injuries, emotional pain and humiliation, and sometimes severe psychological after effects, as sad as that is. Burgess and Holmstrom in 1974 and then again in 1979 described the rape trauma syndrome experienced by many rape victims with 3 kinds of reactions. Emotional responses, of course, disturbances in functioning, where they don't want to go outside, they are afraid of the dark, and changes, of course, in lifestyle, where they no longer they can't go to the store. They become agoraphobic to some extent. They change their lifestyle completely. They change the way that they dress. There's always a fear that something like that has happened, that they were dressed inappropriately, and that's one of the reasons why they have been sexually assaulted. So they changed their lifestyle, they changed their clothes. As weird as that is. The typical rape victim's response unfolds in a series of discrete phases. The acute phase begins with the attack and lasts a few hours or a few days later. This is the acute syndrome, the traumatic syndrome, the acute phase. Within a few hours or days of the attack, many victims slip into a period of false recovery. And this is the problem. This individual will not accuse anyone because they feel like they don't want to relive the incident. So they don't say anything. The denial occurs. I'm okay. Everything is the same as before. This didn't hurt me at all. This didn't bother me. So I'm okay. And then, of course, the PTSD sits in. A secondary crisis occurs in which some of the symptoms of the acute crisis phase, particularly phobias and disturbances in eating and sleeping, return. This phase may last for hours or days before another quiet period emerges in which the victim feels a range of negative emotions such as loneliness, anger, and guilt. They can't trust anybody anymore, especially men. So now, if they were raped by a man, of course, they feel lonely. This was their identity, was the fact that they were attractive to men, and now they can't have anything to do with men anymore. So it makes them angry, it makes them feel guilty because they feel like possibly they did something to incur the assault. And so they start feeling lonely. They can't sleep, they can't eat, they're not hungry anymore for one reason or another. And so this is a recurring cycle that just continues to occur. Long-term counseling for rape victims is difficult to provide because of the lack of staff at some rape crisis centers, and in some cases because of a feeling that counseling is no longer needed. Remember, they're going through these strange cycles. Whoops, I'm sorry, I went the wrong direction. They're going through these strange cycles where sometimes they feel like they're recovered. And this thing can cycle through a month. You can go through 2 or 3 cycles where sometimes they feel okay, and sometimes they feel like that it just happened, and then all of a sudden they get depressed. And of course, this will cause depression. This fact that they sometimes they can forget it, sometimes they're sleeping okay, and sometimes they're not sleeping at all, and they're not eating very well, and they start feeling lonely, angry, and guilty. They change their lifestyle. So whereas before they may have been fairly svelte, now all of a sudden they gain weight. They stop bathing. They don't wash their hair. Because they don't want to be attractive to men. They don't like men anymore. So they try to make themselves so that they're not attractive. And they will continue to go through this cycle. But sometimes they feel okay. Even after 1 year, many victims continue to suffer emotionally. Among the major problems were fear and anxiety. And this is the PTSD of rape. PTSD from combat is totally different. Totally different situation. So, and that's one of the problems with talking about PTSD. Are we talking about, depending on what the trauma was, if it was a sexual assault, then the trauma is going to be completely different. If it was combat, it's going to be completely different. So the treatment isn't the same, can't be the same. Findings also indicated that rape victims were significantly more depressed than those who had not been raped, and that fear, anxiety, and depression were highest in women who had been raped more than once. This is the weird part. If a woman has been raped once, she's more likely to be raped a second time. she's more likely than a woman who's never been raped to be raped a second time. Now, you would think that this wouldn't happen because she would be hypervigilant and she'd be less likely, but she's not. Part of her being okay is the fact that she tries to go back to where she was before. It's okay, it's never going to happen again. And then, of course, she gets in the same situation and the same thing happens again. Hopefully not by the same guy. No, I don't know if that's hopefully, I guess. Psychologists, along with psychiatrists and other physicians, often testify as expert witnesses in rape trials, especially about the nature and the consequences of rape trauma syndrome. This is a cycle that can cycle a couple times during a month. Courts around the country are divided, however, on the admissibility of such testimony, depending on what state you live in. Some states will not allow you to even mention the word rape trauma syndrome, as weird as that may seem. And this was part of the problem with Jeffrey Epstein. Remember, Jeffrey Epstein was charged with trafficking and statutory rape in Florida. Well, the problem in Florida was there were some of the things that you can bring out in court in New York State, you can't bring out up in court in Florida. Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots. Now, why in the world would he go to Florida to visit prostitutes? Why in the world, he's from Massachusetts, why in the world would he have to go all the way to Florida to visit a prostitute? And the answer is because their laws are different. It's one of the reasons why Jeffrey Epstein got a sweetheart deal. And he was able to do that in Florida. If he had been convicted in New York State, they would have put him in jail and thrown away the key. But in Florida, he was able to get off, pretty much. They didn't even put him on the registry as a sexual predator. As weird as that sounds. All the states are different, so you have to be careful.
If a person is convicted of, say, child abuse or sexual abuse of some kind, would their record follow them to the other states?
It all depends on the state.
Yeah.
It all depends.
Or
Sometimes states don't talk to each other. Indiana and Ohio. If you do something in Ohio, if you commit a crime in Ohio, then Indiana will never find out. And vice versa. Indiana and Ohio do not communicate with one another.
Kind of like the way it is with Navajo Nation in the state of Arizona. Like what happens on the res stays on the res, and then what happens off the res happens off the res, kind of thing.
So if
a
you
lot of the sex offenders are not even registered with the Navajo Nation.
Exactly.
Because they have no program, no money to get this
Exactly.
program running. So you have sex offenders running all over the place, even places where they have schools.
That's why I checked the sex offender registry list, because they are required to register federally, so you can still find them, and there's quite a few in the area, probably about.
That's what Sue was so upset about.
20,
Sue-
30.
Exactly. Sue had found somebody going to school here who was on the sex registry in Arizona, but nobody here knew it because nobody here checks it.
Yeah.
So she disclosed that information, and they couldn't do anything about it because different laws. I mean, it's a totally different situation.
Would that not be on their criminal background?
Sure, in Arizona.
I was gonna look into
Are we federally funded, so we have to comply with the federal laws? Why?
You have to
So they
comply
can't
with
do
federal
anything?
laws, but not with state laws.
Yeah, not the state. And I believe a
I
lot of
thought
the
federal
housing.
law superseded state
It
and
does.
tribal laws.
It does.
So how does this proceed?
Because we make our own rules here.
Because they were only registered in the state of Arizona. They weren't registered on the federal.
List, yeah. And I believe too, a lot of the HUD programs, a lot of the resources that we have here, people that do have felonies, a lot of the times they're not allowed, especially the ones with assault, with bodily harm and murders, they're not allowed to get a lot of the benefits But they have girlfriends and wives and mothers that they can leech onto, and they can get into the housing programs and other programs like that we was talking about. So that's how I found how there was some living at the apartment complex.
How exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
When we first moved here, we lived down in Julian, two-story housing, and I found out several months after we had moved in that there was a pedophile living next door.
Sure.
But the contract on the house itself was through his wife,
Right.
and he had already molested his kids
Oh, yeah.
when they were growing up.
So that's why a lot of it goes unreported and
Yeah.
unresolved.
Sure.
It's like, we're
And that's
moving.
why they can't make any laws or rules or guidelines about it, because no one's turning anyone in to even start off any kind of case or anything.
Yeah. Family is protecting you.
Yeah.
And getting angry if anybody says anything about it.
Oh, yeah. It's like they get more offended than the actual person, and the actual person really could care less.
Right.
Yeah.
I know of one who is in prison right now.
Two basic strategies have been emphasized. We're talking about preventing rape. One is training potential victims how best to protect themselves against rape. For example, women who did not resist a rape attack were twice as likely to suffer a completed rape as women who tried to protect themselves. So you're better off fighting. You might get knocked around, but who knows what would have happened if you hadn't fought. Potentially it's not going to happen if you fight back. And so that's probably the best strategy, is to fight back with anything that you've got. Keys, whatever you've got. And hit them in places that hurt. There are lots of places on the human body that if you strike that place, it hurts, especially with males. But you can also hit them in the ears, the nose. If you hit somebody in the nose and you break their nose, they can't see because their eyes will and they'll get a raccoon bruising around their eyes, but they can't see because their eyes will tear up, and they can't stop it from tearing. So the best thing to do is to blind somebody, and not to punch their. It's not a Three Stooges situation where you're poking them in the eye. But if you hit them in the nose, they're almost non-functional after that. Designing effective treatment for rapists so that they do not repeat the crimes is another way to do this. We need to stop these men from doing it again, and chemical castration is one of those techniques that we can use. We can give them anti-androgen chemicals, and the anti-androgen chemicals will lower their testosterone level. If they lower their testosterone level, they are less aggressive.
Are most of these voluntary? Or are they ordered?
Oh, the chemical castration is against the law in most states in the union. It is only legal in select places, so it's not all that common. And it does have to be voluntary, unfortunately. Because they're either taking a pill or getting a shot. And the shot that they get is Depo-Provera, interestingly enough, which is a female hormone. It's what they give women for birth control. Same stuff. As curious as all this is. But they have to go in. If they're out on the street, then they have to either take the pills or they have to go in and get the shots. So it's real easy for them not to comply. In the typical rape prevention program, participants discuss several facts and myths about rape. They learn how to avoid situations involving heavy use of alcohol. They practice resisting pressure for unwanted sexual activity, and role play other strategies for protecting themselves, which is a good idea. Just don't be alone with anybody when you're inebriated. The problem is when you're inebriated, your focus is fairly limited. So you don't know who's around you. You don't know who's behind you. In some states, men convicted of sex crimes are required to complete a sex offender treatment program before being considered for parole. As a consultant in the state of Ohio, we were dealing with these types of programs, we had to determine whether they were safe to release on the public. Of course, usually it had to do with parole. It didn't have to do with them serving their complete time. If we told them that they didn't seem to be safe enough, then they wouldn't allow them to go out on parole. But usually, I mean, if you're convicted 10 to 15, then 15 years is as much as you can hold them. After that, you have to let them go. That's the way it works. You can't hold them forever just because they're a danger to society. The treatment of rapists can involve psychological, physical, and/or medical procedures. On the international scene, neurosurgery and surgical castration have been used, but their effectiveness is unclear. The reality is that a lot of rape doesn't have anything to do with sex. As weird as that sounds, it has to do with violence, has to do with anger, and the male can actually be erect despite the fact that he has taken the anti-androgen chemicals. So it doesn't always work. He can still have an erection. He may not be able to ejaculate. He may not have any sperm if they castrate him, but he can still have an erection and he can still have sex. In the old days, they used to castrate men to make their voices higher so that they could sing at a higher register. They also would, if they were guards at a harem, they would castrate them so that they couldn't impregnate, the harem. But the reality is they could still have sex, which is a little weird. In the United States, it is not uncommon for anti-androgen drugs to be prescribed to sex offenders in order to reduce their sex drive, a procedure sometimes referred to as chemical castration. Anti-androgen treatments have problems, of course. There are negative side effects. The negative side effects, the men don't feel right. Men drop out of these programs very readily. It's voluntary. So if they decide that they don't like themselves anymore, one of the side effects is that they grow breast tissue. And a lot of guys don't like having, breast tissue. So they'll stop, they'll quit. The other thing that happens to them is they'll lose their facial hair. They'll lose their chest hair. They'll lose their pubic hair. Their legs will go bald because they're taking female hormones. So they stop because they start looking and acting differently and they don't like it. The treatment does not always reduce sexual arousal and sexual offenses. They can still think sexual thoughts and they can still become sexually aroused. Usually they can't complete the rape or they can't complete intercourse. So this can be a problem. Or as far as they're concerned, it's a problem. In some men, arousal is not dependent on their level of testosterone, so the drugs have little effect on their sexual behavior. Rape is often an act of violence, not of inappropriate sexual arousal. Consequently, drugs aimed at reducing sexual desire may be pointing at the wrong target. So because they're angry rapists. They're angry at their mother, they're angry at their sister, whatever. They're angry at women, and that's the reason they do what they do. Another approach to treating aggressive sexual offenders involves combining several behavior therapy techniques into an integrated treatment program. Existing programs appear to be able to produce short-term decreases in recidivism, but long-term improvements have been difficult to achieve. As a result, relapse prevention techniques have been added to some programs. The reality is that we learn our sexual response when we are children. We learn it at a relatively young age, and it is very difficult to condition these sexual responses out of somebody. It's just like how you react to stress. An individual learns how to react to stress by dealing with their parents. How did their parents deal with stress? Well, you can change them, you can convince them that this isn't a good idea, but then once they get into a stressful situation, a lot of times they will go back to the way that they responded to stress before. So if their parents were alcoholics and that's how they handled stress, and this individual was an alcoholic, now they're a recovered alcoholic, if they get into a stressful situation, there's going to be pressure on that individual to go back to drinking. That's the way it works. We are conditioned. We have all these conditioned responses in our being. And a lot of times we go back to that. It's safe. It feels right to us. We can re-educate people, but sometimes the re-education isn't as strong as the initial conditioning process, which happened when you were a child. Everything is correct when you're a child. Your parents have absolute control over you. It's an absolute answer to a question. This is Dominique Strauss-Kahn. He was nicknamed the Great Seducer because he's so attractive, as you can plainly see. He was also the chief of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, the infamous IMF. While visiting a New York City hotel, he surprised the maid and forced her into oral and anal sex. Although Strauss-Kahn was a renowned philanderer, it turned out that the maid had made accusations of assault before, though she recanted her testimony. The case was dropped because of the tainted history of both parties. She had accused men of doing this before, and he had done this before. And because both of them had a tainted past, they just dropped the case. There's nothing they could do. They couldn't. It was a he said, she said situation, and of course the lawyers were going, but you know, he's a known seducer. Of course he did this, and the other lawyers were saying, well, she's a known accuser. Of course she says he did this. She's just trying to get money out of him. He is no longer the head of the IMF, by the way. It's a female. Where is she from? I think she's from Switzerland. Anyway, he's no longer the head of the IMF. Sexual harassment, since we're having such a good time talking about rape, let's talk about sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is fairly prevalent in the United States, but there's a reason why sexual harassment is out there. We have changed the way that we work. We've changed the rules of the workplace. In the 1950s, of course, things were a lot different. There were very few women working in businesses. It wasn't that common to see women in businesses. It was also a time when men dominated a lot of things. And there was no question as to whether he could call a young lady sweetie or not. It was a term of endearment, and it was okay. Of course, now things have changed. There are more women in the workplace. Men aren't as dominant as they have been in the past. So the rules have changed, which makes it a little weird when we start arguing about whether Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted somebody back in the 1970s, because in the 1970s the rules were different. The same thing's happening with people like Donald Trump and Harvey Weinstein. The rules were different back then. Somebody accusing somebody of sexual assault in the 70s or 80s, totally different situation. It's a totally different time. I'm not trying to exonerate the men who did these things. I'm just saying that historically, because we changed the way we look at things today, we can't condemn the past. A good example would be homosexuality. Homosexuality was against the law in lots of parts of the United States. If you were in the United States military, you couldn't be gay and be in the military. If they found out that you were gay, they would board you out of the service. This is when I was in the service, and I was in the service until 1983. It was the same way with my wife, when my wife was in the service. She was in the service until 2001. However, under President Bill Clinton, they changed the rules. The rules were don't ask, don't tell. In other words, they couldn't ask you if you were gay under Bill Clinton. Now, of course, you can be openly gay and be in the military. The rules have changed. Back in the 50s and 60s, if you were gay, you could be put in prison. Not anymore, of course. Now, if you're gay, you can get married. Well, certainly you couldn't get married back in the old days. That's just wasn't the way it worked. So things have changed, and we need to recognize that. So when we're looking at history, we need to figure out how it was back in those days. We can't judge the past by what is common today. Homosexuality used to be against the law. Gay marriage, my goodness, not Bill Clinton, George W. Bush was elected on a platform stating that he would never allow marriage between a man or a woman and a woman. That was his platform, and he was elected president. And the conservatives were screaming, marriage between a man and a woman only. Anyway, okay, so things have changed. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Things have changed. Sexual harassment is fairly prevalent. For example, a study examining sexual harassment in academic medicine found that about half of the female faculty experienced sexual harassment. This is the faculty. This would be, well, I'm not going to make an example. Both women and men experience sexual harassment. Both report that other men sexually harass them. Evidently, I'm not very attractive to men. I've never been sexually harassed by a man, but I've been sexually harassed by a female. I'm bragging. But evidently, guys don't find me attractive. I'm complaining. Okay. U.S. federal law defines harassment as follows: unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature constitutes sexual harassment when 1. Submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly as a term of condition of an individual's employment. So you have to have, and that's what was happening with Harvey Weinstein. They used to talk about the casting couch. What they were talking about was if you were a female and you wanted a part in a movie, then you had to have sex with the producer or with Harvey Weinstein. Well, Harvey Weinstein. And he did this. He did this on numerous occasions to women. Gwyneth Paltrow is one of the individuals that he has assaulted. When my son was in Hollywood, there was a story going around that Keanu Reeves had been sexually assaulted by a producer. And that's how he got into that strange movie about Bob and Ted's Excellent Adventure. That was the story going around Hollywood, that Keanu Reeves had an affair with the producer in order to get that part. So this was not that uncommon. Back in the 70s and 80s and 90s until we stopped all this stuff. Number 2, submission to or rejection of such conduct by an individual is used as the basis for employment decisions affecting such individual. If you play ball, then you'll get the raise. You'll get more money. Number 3, and this is also known as sleeping your way to the top. It's a sad situation, I guess. Such conduct has the purpose of or effect of unreasonably interfering with an individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. I was working at another institution, and this individual liked to look at gay pornography. And one day he was looking at gay pornography, and a couple of women walked past his office and saw that he had the gay pornography on his computer. And they turned him in, and he was fired for an uncomfortable or offensive working environment, hostile working environment, because of the gay pornography, which seems really stupid to me. In 2003, I went down to South America on a Fulbright trip. This is in the summer. I was gone for 6 weeks. I was in Peru and I was in Guatemala. When I came back, my computer was gone. And I said, where'd my computer go? And they said, well, we came in to change something on it, and there was all this gay pornography on your computer. Somebody had gone into my office while I was gone. And they were using my office to watch gay pornography, which is kind of weird. I thought it was weird. Don't look at me like that. I didn't have anything to do with it. And they're going, well, of course, they knew exactly when. You could see the dates. And it didn't have anything to do with me. I was down in South America. I wasn't remotely looking at pornography from Peru. We didn't
So
even have.
you didn't have to prove that it wasn't you, or did you have to?
No, I was gone. I was down in South America, so it couldn't possibly be me. And they had the dates, when you have it tells you what date somebody looked at something. You've got the site right here and you've got the date right over here, so it was fairly obvious. And they confiscated my computer, gave me a new computer, that was kind of nice. Anyway, and they knew who it was, that's the weird part, but it was it was a relative of the president, so she didn't fire him. Jeez. He knew I wasn't there. Well, there were a bunch of us that were gone. I don't know why he used my office. Yes, I do. My office was kind of isolated, so he could watch his pornography, or he could just close the door. But it was right beside the dean of academics. That's where my office was. So they knew he was going in there. They knew he was going into my office. I was the only one in the office. One problem with the federal definition of sexual harassment is that it leaves key terms such as unwelcome and unreasonably interfering open to varying interpretations. And of course, this is a problem we're having right now. Interpretation of what something says. We've got the transcript of the call between the Ukrainian president and Donald Trump, and now we're interpreting different words. Is there a quid pro quo? That's the question that's coming up right now. When men and women differ in their evaluations of potentially harassing interactions, women are more likely than men to classify a specific act as harassment. It may be a joke to a man, but it may be completely serious to a woman. And this is a problem as well. Males and females are not the same. And I guess you notice that it doesn't, and it's not just your hair. Women have long hair and men have short hair. It doesn't make any difference. Hostile sexism involves antipathy toward women, reflecting a belief that males are superior to women and should be dominant over them. Now, this was a very common idea back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It was very common. When Richard Nixon was president of the United States, he wouldn't allow a woman in his presence who was wearing slacks. All women had to wear dresses or skirts, as weird as that sounds. Now, why in the world would he do this? He did this because he was president, for one thing, and he also did this because he considered women wearing slacks as a sign of homosexuality, and he didn't like that. Okay. Male dominance. It's an old idea. It comes out of the Bible. It comes out of the Quran. It comes out of just about every religious writing we can think of. For some reason, men dominate in religious writings. Those high in hostile sexism are less inclined to include the sexual harassment has occurred. They don't recognize it. Benevolent sexism is an attitude of protection toward women. It reflects a belief that as the weaker sex, women need to be shielded from the world's harshness. I used to work at a place, and I opened the door for I would open the door for anybody. But there was one lady that she would not walk through the door if I was holding the door. She felt that it was benevolent sexism, that I was being sexist by assuming that I needed to open the door for her. And she felt that was offensive. So she would not walk through the door if I opened it. However, if she got to the door first, she wouldn't open the door for me either, which I thought was fairly rude. I mean, I would open the door for her, why wouldn't she open the door and hold the damn door for me? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean damn, I meant something else. Anyway, benevolent sexism. The courts following federal guidelines have recognized two types of sexual harassment. Quid pro quo harassment, there's a word that we've been seeing here lately, is seen as in an implicit or explicit bargain in which the harasser promises a reward or threatens punishment depending on the victim's response. So you do this and then I will give you a raise. It's kind of like prostitution. Or you do this and I won't fire you. And this is known as quid pro quo harassment. Hostile workplace harassment involves demeaning comments, acts of touching or attempted intimacy, or the display of provocative photographs or artwork. And that's what was going on with my friend and his, and he was my friend, by the way, but he was watching gay porn, and the women saw it, and the women were offended by it.
So he was your friend?
He was my friend.
Well, you're pretty odd yourself, so of course you're friends with you.
There's something wrong with me, obviously. I have friends who are sexual harassers. Teresa Harris was the rentals manager at the Forklift Systems in Nashville. And this is an actual picture of Forklift Systems in Nashville. I found it on the internet. I'm so excited. She suffered a number of suggestive and demeaning comments from her boss. Now remember, this is Nashville, it's in Tennessee. Tennessee is in the South. The South is fairly traditional, very conservative. So the idea was that we are Southern gentlemen, and of course we can sexually harass women if we want to. She needed her job, so she ignored him for 2 years until he made a public sexual accusation against her. I know, that was stupid. She took her case to the courts, but she received mixed results. Remember, this is in the South. She took the case to the Supreme Court to try to prove sexual harassment, though the lower courts claimed there was no proof of psychological harm. And that was the reason that she didn't win. Harris versus Forklift Systems Incorporated in 1993. Should plaintiffs be forced to prove that they were psychologically harmed in order to persuade a jury that sexual harassment has occurred? The unanimous decision of the court held that it was not necessary for plaintiffs to prove that they had suffered psychological injuries. So just because you put up with it for an extended length of time doesn't mean that it can continue. Doesn't mean that it didn't bother you. You don't have to prove that you have a mental illness. You're not depressed because of the sexual harassment. The Supreme Court decision listed several criteria by which to decide whether an action constitutes sexual harassment, including the frequency and severity of the behavior, whether the behavior was physically threatening or humiliating, and whether it would unreasonably interfere with an employee's work performance. And of course, it did interfere with her work performance, and that's why she won the case. Okay, why don't we stop right here? We'll pick this up next time with Justice O'Connor. And we'll talk more about marijuana next time, I guess. Or hemp.
What chapter is this in?
6.